It's round 9 here at Grand Prix Milwaukee. TJ Rogers and Eduardo Sajgalik, and we have got quite a face-off on the left side of the field. You see Samuel Eilenfeld with Boros midrange up against Petr Sekurik on Golgari midrange, which this was a really powerful deck yesterday, putting quite a few copies into the undefeated list as well.
Yeah, the Golgari midrange deck can fight from a lot of different angles, and it tends to be okay with one-for-one removal, as we've kind of seen in this field. And here you can already kind of see the power of the Golgari deck against these mid-range decks. Something like Ravenous Chupacabra being quite powerful, but Petr deciding to put it away, likely trying to stock that graveyard or look for something higher impact if the right 4-drop is in his hand.
All right, and we have got Adanto Vanguard coming down early for Samuel, and that is followed up by the Jadelight Ranger, which is now a 4/3, that Explore ability, which it does twice. It is going to put 2 of those +1/+1 counters, a pretty sizable amount of power, and keeping that Jadelight Ranger up top, so that's going to be in the hand next turn.
Yeah.
Right back to Eilenfeld, who's going to go ahead play a Plains. And this Boros mid-range deck, how does that mid-range term sort of shift the mentality or the play style of that traditionally aggressive deck?
Yeah, usually when you see Boros mid-range, you should think there's a few more red cards in the deck, and that basic mountain is a hint. When you see Clifftop Retreat, Sacred Foundry, the deck might be almost mono-white main deck, but when you see basic mountain, that should tell you, well, this deck is probably more mid-range. It may or may not have Benalish Marshall. There are lists that play Benalish Marshall with the basic mountain, but there's only one basic mountain in those decks. But the goal is usually to have a top-off, a payoff. That usually being heroic reinforcements, but also we've seen a lot of Aurelia, Exemplar of Justice, kind of another 4-mana threat that helps against the sweepers that everyone's bringing in.
And for that turn 3, Eilenfeld is going to throw down History of Benalia, making a knight, and that's going to get followed up from Sekurik with another copy of Jadelight Ranger. Vivian Reed goes to the graveyard, and a land goes to hand. So let's see if that's going to end up acting as the 4th land. Eilenfeld, of course, on a Rookie of the Year for last year, had that top 4 at Pro Tour Ixalan, and has just been sort of a mainstay since then, and he's been really putting on a great show.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, Rookie of the Year is not an easy title. You have to come to the Pro Tour, have a really good result to start off with, and then kind of rattle off a few more good results on top. So really strong achievement here.
In a lot of the ways, he's kind of the hometown hero. He's actually from Minneapolis, which is not too far away from here. It's going to be Shock taking down one of those Jadelight Rangers, and it is going to be the Vanguard as well as a Knight attacking in. That other Jadelight Ranger had gotten aggressive, so they're going to get back in. And that History of Benalia is going to hit its final chapter next turn, which means that all of those Knights are going to get +2, +1. And we also see a treasure map coming down to the battlefield, another indicator of that mid-range strategy. Yeah. 2-mana artifact. You can pay 1, tap it, and scry 1.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just that. The Shock and the treasure map definitely hint towards a different type of deck. And if I'm in Petr's seat, started Endo Vanguard, History of Benalia, the mountain was kind of telling me there might be, something different, maybe an Aurelia I have to worry about. But then you see Shock and treasure map, and you're like, okay, what is my opponent actually trying to do? Because that's going to define my game plan. Clearly, Petr is a bit behind on the board. It depends on Petr's hand here. That's why the advantage bar hasn't moved yet. Without that information, it's hard to tell. Mm-hmm. But Petr is going to have to navigate this game in a way to decide, okay, what is my opponent's game plan, and what's my best way to respond here? And yeah, Jadelight Ranger is really a setup card, but Petr maybe really needs that land to get to something like a Carnage Tyrant in hand, or and it seems like Petr has access to quite a few Vraska's Contempts in hand. I saw at least 2.
And that Merfolk Branchwalker currently on top, that's going to go to the graveyard too, so he really looking for something else. Saw both Assassin's Trophy and that Branchwalker, but that third Jadelight Ranger now on the battlefield, 2 of them remaining, and there are some 4/3s that are standing pretty nicely in the way. We're about to see that final chapter of History of Benalia happen, and right now you can see Samuel going for the scry from that treasure map.
Yeah, by the way, I saw why Petr was looking so hard for more lands. He has in hand 2 copies of Find Finality.
Ooh.
But yeah, here this is going to be a big attack. It's kind of awkward that Petter is at 12. At a slightly higher life total, Petter could just take the damage here from the Knights and then leave Samuel with like a bunch of 2/2s, which are not a problem against the 4 freeze. But the issue here, this is a lot of damage, so I wouldn't be surprised if at least one of these Jade Light Rangers has to jump in front. But the main deck, Direfleet Daredevil, this is a true mid-range deck.
And that is probably going to exile the Assassin's Trophy out of there. It does have the ability to cast that and eliminate one of these creatures. It would give Petr Sakurek a land out of his library.
Yeah, which actually Petter's relatively happy about. Now this gives Petter the kind of unusual out of going from 4 mana to maybe hitting the land that's needed for the finality. I mean, if finality comes down, I mean, Samuel's deck definitely can tango a little later in the game here with that treasure map. But this is really going to depend on Petter's next draw. For now, Samuel a little ahead, but if Petter can draw a land, that's going to change very fast. The first will be the finality, and then we're going to try to find getting back something like a Chupacabra and a Jade Light Ranger and putting, Samuel behind. But that treasure map is going to represent a lot of cards, and there's not much Petter can do to prevent that.
Yeah, and the finale part of that card is where you can put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control if there was still one. Looks like that's not going to be the case. And then all creatures get -4/-4 until end of turn. And that would actually be enough to kill even the Adanto Vanguard. Its indestructible ability would not have any effect.
Yeah, if you want a clear sign that Samuel's deck is mid-range, that Stone Quarry basically tells the story. When you play Stone, the only people who play Stone Quarry are not looking to just beat down. There's probably not many 1-drops in Samuel's deck. It's probably very heavy on double white cards, maybe a few double red cards in the deck. So Petter is going to... This is important information for Petter going into Game 2, because it means to not sideboard necessarily against Boros aggro, but to think more in terms of a mid-range strategy. So something like Vivian Reed, that would be a card you would cut post-board, is definitely going to have more impact here. But yeah, Petter, without hitting the land, is forced here to just play the Llanowar Elf, keep up Vraska's Contempt, and hope it's good enough.
I like the decision, by the way, to go with the Stone Quarry, avoiding the gate entirely.
Yeah, I mean, to each their own. But yeah, and Samuel's deck is really much more on the top end. I mean, we saw Adanto Vanguard and History of Benalia, but that's as aggressive as this deck really gets. You have the Aurelias, but there's also free Lyra Dawnbringers in the deck.
Now Sakurek is down to 5, and this is a swing in with the whole team. Getting in front of that Adanto Vanguard, we're going to pay the 4 life, but that is still Vraska's Contempt. Coming down, that is going to point at it after that 4 life gets paid. The Llanowar Elf is going to survive, and that Direfleet Daredevil and that Knight able to get in their hits. But we are going to be taking a pretty healthy dose of damage, and we could be untapping here with the ability to cast Finality and sweep what is remaining of that board.
Yeah. I mean, Rekindling Phoenix, though, is a very good answer here. It's allowing... It means that Petter can't just Finality here, since there would be a 0/1 token behind, and you can't... And at that point, Petter would just die to it. So this is a really rough board, but Petter with access to another Vraska's Contempt in hand, if Petter has a cheap removal spell, might be fine. The key is that Samuel just doesn't have access to any reach. There's only kind of that one shock that can deal damage out of nowhere.
That's a powerful owl. All right, and it is going to be Midnight Reaper coming down. A little bit of a liability when your creature's dying means that you are going to draw a card, but you're also going to lose a life. And Sakurek is at 3 right now, so can't even afford to have too many of his own creatures die. Looks like Islandfeld here with that Phoenix, which can get up in the air. Things do not look good, and if there's no response from Sakurek, this is going to be the end of Game 1.
Right, but here, Petter with the second Vraska's Contempt, able to block, giving himself the option to block with Llanowar Elves and cast the Vraska's Contempt. It's worth noting the Finality is just going to become worse over time here, because Samuel is going to be unlikely to play creatures that just die to it straight up. And at that point, you're really just dealing with a Direfleet Daredevil and a Knight. However, the Find part is going to be really key. That Ravenous Chupacabra that got put in the graveyard earlier, getting that back with Find, very key. But Midnight Reaper here is going to have to almost assuredly block the Knight token, because that life loss is going to look like a real problem at free life.
Could also end up blocking the Direfleet Daredevil because it has that first strike ability, to where you wouldn't end up drawing a card, say if the Llanowar Elf died from it as well.
I think drawing a card is fine. Again, you're facing a deck that doesn't have direct damage, and at this point, pretty sure Petter sees Rekindling Phoenix and Aurelia. There's not going to be really a heroic reinforcements in the deck, but yeah.
Aurelia is going to give, the Direfleet Daredevil is going to get that +2/+0 boost at the beginning of combat. That's also going to give it trample, and the Phoenix is jumping into the fray alongside the Knight and that Pirate.
As long as Samuel, let's see. Well, to be fair here, Petter goes up to 5, so the trample damage wouldn't kill Petter, but this is going to be a really hard board to come back from. The combination, and with the first strike, this is actually lethal, I believe, because this is 4 damage, plus the 2 damage from the Knight token should be lethal damage here. Essentially, 1 to the elf, free trample, Petter to 2, and then 2 triggers from Midnight Reaper, and we're done.
Yeah, that actually locked it up, and I wonder if blocking in the other direction might have had a little bit of a benefit there, allowing your Midnight Reaper to actually be the first to die. You would end up at 1.
Well, it's better to have another turn, even though I don't think Petter could have taken it down. No. It's better to have one more turn of action.
All right, so Sakurik heading to the sideboard, going to be on the play for Game 2, and Sakurik, eyes on making it to the top 8, has 7 of them currently, and one thing that's really impressive, the conversion rate is fantastic. Of those 7 Grand Prix top 8s, 3 of them became wins, most recently at a team limited one.
I mean, the story behind that one is one of the most wonderful things. Essentially, Petter came to Washington because it was very close to the Pro Tour, so he was ready to play an individual Grand Prix. Actually, it was teams. So the bat signal was out, and he essentially had to find teammates because, I can't play an individual team Grand Prix on my own. So he found 2 teammates. That was the team that won the tournament.
And that was Peter Ingram and Andrew Tenjum who ended up joining him, and actually in the finals there, played against another remarkable team of Ben Stark, Eric Froelich, and Paulo Vitor Dalmadorosa.
Yeah, taking down a Grand Prix when you had to find your teammates on Thursday is not the most common occurrence, and that was a really impressive achievement.
Just like we drew it up.
Well, to be honest, they just drew it up to try to play the thing in the first place. Then took it down. That's got to be one of the most impressive wins in Magic's history.
Prep for a Thursday, win on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, they were prepared for a totally different format. I guess it was still limited, but yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the sideboards of these 2 decks. We've got Islandfelt and Sakurik, Golgari mid-range, and Boros mid-range. What do you think about their plans as they're heading into Game 2?
I think that with Petter, Sakurik, seeing Rekindling Phoenix, seeing Aurelia and Stone Quarry especially, with Treasure Map, Petter is not going into this matchup thinking Samuel is on a aggressive deck. Petter is going, this is definitely a mid-range deck. So you're not going to sideboard necessarily as if it was. You're going to be more closer to something like Boros Angels. So the cast downs are probably going to come in, but they're very awkward against something like Aurelia or Lyra Dawnbringer. However, maybe a necessary evil. But honestly, looking at Samuel's list, cast down isn't where we want to be. Assassin's Trophy is a little closer, giving the mana not great, but you have to deal with these Flying Angels. Vivian Reed, normally a card you board out in against the aggressive decks, a card you really want, since one of the best responses to an Aurelia or a Lyra Dawnbringer, slam Vivian Reed, -3, kill the flyer, be very far ahead. I don't like the Deathgorge Scavengers. I don't like the duress against a lot of flying Mythic Angels. Plaguecrafter, though, very good. Deals with Venanto Vanguard. Not very good against History, but you can kind of work that out. I think the one Plaguecrafter has a lot of value. We're probably not going to like the Ritual of Soot, but the Eldest Reborn is nice, and the Nebraska Relic Seeker has a similar effect to Vivian Reed.
All right.
Yeah. Samuel's side. The free Banefire is kind of interesting. I've seen kind of these Boros decks differ on whether to board in Banefire or not against a deck like Golgari midrange. My gut instinct tells me you'd rather try to fight the board, since that's how you're going to get ahead. But unfortunately, that plays into the Golgari's deck plan. So can you deal enough early damage that Banefire goes over the top? My feeling is probably not, so I would doubt we see Banefire. 2 Dawn of Hope, though, really good in a matchup where you want to grind. Again, weak to Vivian Reed, but so is most of your deck. So you're going to have to overload it. 1 Ixalan's Binding, definitely coming in. The Justice Strikes, they're okay. This isn't really the best matchup. Again, that 1-for-1 removal not being key in a matchup like this. But I like the 2 Sign of Urza, a way to get card advantage, not very easy for the Golgari mid-range deck to attack. The 2 Seal Away, the 2 Settle the Wreckage, they can be quite useful, exile removal being key, Settle the Wreckage in particular, and that 1 The Immortal Sun, a spectacular card against a Golgari mid-range deck, and definitely the highlight of the sideboard here.
And the Immortal Sun is, I've been waiting for you to get to that card because it's got so many abilities and all of them are excellent in this matchup. You draw an additional card at your draw step, all of your creatures get this power and toughness boost, and also Planeswalker's abilities can't be activated.
Right, and there's definitely a disparity here since for Petter, the Vivian Reed and the Vraska are certainly much more important to have online. And that's kind of why you'll also see the 2 Assassins Trophy most likely come in. You have to... giving the land is not great, but you have to deal with potentially Planeswalkers. You have to deal with potentially something like a big Flying Angel, the Immortal Sun. So like that versatility is very important. But there's not many answers to the Immortal Sun outside of those Assassin's Trophies. So it's going to be what's going to be key for Samuel if the Immortal Sun is drawn is to slam it down once Petter doesn't have access. If Petter gets an Assassin's Trophy on it, then that is a very big blowout.
Yeah, and one thing that we didn't get to see Petter's deck really put together in Game 1 is that it is running 4 copies of that Wild Growth Walker in the main deck, which is something that, 3 to 4 has really been what we've seen a lot this weekend, as opposed to the 2 that was about a week ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's your best card against the aggressive decks, and it happens to be one of your best cards against the, controlling, the Izzet Drake's deck. It grows out of size. The Izzet Drake's deck, easy to kill from 20, but needs an additional attack, which can be very difficult to obtain. So the Wild Growth Walker has been a key card in too many matchups that are, in the metagame. So now it's going back to free. And often the people that play free Wild Growth Walker play a 4 from the sideboard. That 1-2 punch of Wild Growth Walker into J-Light Ranger is extremely strong if you get to pull it off against any aggressive deck. And yeah, it's the highlight of this Golgari mid-range deck. You can customize and in-tune it to beat the metagame you expect.
And talk about customizing. The red decks that we've seen this weekend, everything from the really aggressive mono red trying to throw down, 1-drop, 2-drop Chain Whirler. And then on this side, or even in, yesterday, a big one that we saw was Sam Black's deck. But Islandfeld's playing a much bigger version, and just seeing the wide range of these decks has been really impressive as well.
I'm pretty sure Samuel Black's deck is the biggest version. But unfortunately, and you can kind of tell with the free Banefires in Samuel's sideboard, Jeskai Control is not a good matchup. All the control decks are going to be really rough matchups for Boros mid-range. And at that point, you need something to go over the top, and Banefire is the tool of choice. Try to get in some early damage with Adento Vanguards, Knights, maybe the 1 or 2 Angels that come through, and then finish it off with an uncounterable burn spell for 5 or 6, or maybe 2.
Hey, you've got Treasure Map in the deck as well, so sometimes those treasures, rather than drawing cards with them off of the cove, they could also lend themselves to a pretty large Banefire.
I love, by the way, the interaction between Treasure Map and Karn Sign of Urza. Like, transforming into free treasures and making some gigantic constructs is a really nice interaction.
True, because those constructs do have power and toughness equal to the number of artifacts that you control, and that's really the only way to actually get a bunch of them out there.
Yeah, it's a lot harder since, Kaladesh block rotated and all those inherent artifacts were around.
All right, so it looks like they're just getting set up for Game 2 here. Now, Sakurik is going to be on the play, and that is going to make a much better situation when it comes to some of those powerful curve-outs for the green deck.
Yeah, definitely. You're trying... A deck with Llanowar Elves usually wants to play out. And Petter is probably going to keep those Llanowar Elves in. There's not going to be much removal from the Boros mid-range deck. Petter might be expecting the Deafening Clarion, but it's unlikely. So I think Petter is just going to keep the Llanowar Elf because it's so it just unlocks too much. And a Planeswalker on an empty board is Vivian Reed answering a big flyer is one thing. It's something else when it just happens to be in play.
All right, and it looks like the players are taking a look at their opening 7 here, and we are going to be getting ready and off to the races. It's Overgrown Tomb from Sakurik, and it's right back to Islandfeld, who's going to play that Stone Quarry. It's about the best time to play it is turn 1.
Well, sure, you don't want to play it anytime later. But worth noting, Samuel, one of the best cards in the deck against the Golgari mid-range deck in that Excellence Binding. If you can nab something like a Vivian Reed, that's going to be very powerful.
Something that we didn't see in Game 1, a lot of these white-red decks have started really favoring Tocatli Honor Guard against these Golgari mid-range decks, but that's not a card that I'm actually seeing anywhere in the 75 for Islandfeld.
No, and I think that's the big difference between, say, Grand Prix New Jersey, that was 2 weeks before the Pro Tour, and this Grand Prix, which is a week after. The Golgari mid-range deck has kind of lost metagame share. It was seen as the best deck going into New Jersey, Lille, and not quite so much into the Pro Tour, and certainly less now, which is why we've seen a lot of the success. The deck is no longer targeted, so that's why a lot of the undefeated players are playing it. It's very customizable, and it's still very powerful. People have just forgotten about it. Or they feel like, oh, I'm okay, I can lose 1 or 2 cards, but not really. That's not how easy it is. But yeah, here, Lava Coil on the Death Gorge Scavenger. Death Gorge Scavenger, interesting inclusion. I guess it works in kind of a reverse way where you can exile your own instants and sorceries against our Philly Daredevil.
Just to keep that graveyard nice and empty now that you saw that in the last game. 4 mana here from Sakuric, and it is going to be another one of these dinosaurs. Nice plumage on the... It's a lovely dinosaur, despite how terrifying it is as well.
That's all right. It's just, yeah. Definitely a different take on the card. But the problem is all that red at the bottom,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So we've got the treasure map online there for Islandfeld. It's got 1 counter. When it gets its 3rd counter, it's going to transform into that land Treasure Cove, as well as producing 3 treasures. That's right. You're able to find yourself to the bounty. And then you get to use that for mana, or you can draw cards off of it. Really a lot of versatility there.
Yeah. I'm still thinking about that plumage. It seems so bad. You're trying to scavenge. Scavengers don't have plumes in the wild. You get noticed. That's not a good thing. Sorry. And while we talk about that, of course, Aurelia, the big, gigantic, angelic flyers hit the battlefield.
Yep, the 2/5 hits the field. At combat becomes a 4/5 temporarily, but that's not going to be too relevant right now. That ability, it's also got Mentor. It's got Flying. It's got the, beginning of combat, one of your creatures gets +2/+0, and then Trample if it's red, Vigilance. If it's white, it's going to be a giant attacking creature next turn. Yeah. And it would give itself Vigilance.
Yeah, just a 4/5 flyer, but it seems like Petter has in hand the Ravenous Chupacabra, and this seems as good a target as any.
There it is, and actually there is a nice little way to go about this, because Sakuric can now attack, and could either exile the Lava Coil for an additional power and toughness for the turn, so this is going to be an attack in for 4, or could have gone for that Aurelia and just gained 2 life if Sakuric wanted to buffer that life total a little bit.
Yeah, Petter is realizing that he's the aggressor here. And it makes that Golden Demise in his hand look quite strange in that regard. If you're the aggressor, you don't really want that kind of effect. But I think that the beatdown plan of Adento Vanguard and History of Benalia forced him to board that card in as kind of a catch-all just in case. That was the draw that Samuel went for. But I wouldn't be surprised if Samuel just boarded out the Adento Vanguards. On the draw, they're a lot weaker. And also knowing that Petter might board in against the aggressive deck, it becomes a potential liability. So I wouldn't be surprised if Samuel just went bigger and got rid of the Adento Vanguards here as the slide out.
The second Stone Quarry of the deck, there are 2 of them, comes down to the battlefield, and now there is 5 power opposing. Islandfeld just kicking the turn back. Not a whole lot of action this turn. 3 mana remains if there's anything in the form of removal or any sort of reactive spell to what Sakuric is going to try and do, but this is going to be an attack in for 5, and we'll have the opportunity to exile that Aurelia, gain 2 life up to 22, 5 mana, which is waiting for the second main phase.
Yeah, and here it seems like it's just going to be Vraska's Contempt on the pass since there's not many options for Petter. But you might have noticed, like, why was it Lava Coil and not Aurelia the first attack? Petter, again, the aggressor, really favoring taking away the instant or sorcery to deal that extra point of damage. That was more important than gaining 2 life. Obviously, now you do it because you want to, but you might as well gain the 2 life in the process. But yeah, Samuel is going to pull a little ahead here with this Treasure Cove, and it's going to be up to Petter to start drawing some powerful cards to take over.
Yep, and this is transforming into the Cove. We're going to get those 3 treasures alongside that 4 remaining land, so there is quite a bit of potential in this one. Assuming that he did board in Karn, that could be a really powerful way to sort of restabilize this board. At the moment, we did see that whatever card is on top, he chose to keep that up there. Looks like I do see a Lyra Dawnbringer.
That might have been the Immortal Sun.
Oh, wow. It's a 4-mana play coming down right now. That Treasure Cove will be able to tap for mana next turn as well. It does transform into a land. So the 6 mana is currently available. And it's Ixalan's Binding taking down the Deathgorge Scavenger. So now just a Ravenous Chupacabra trying to hold down the pressure. There is 11 life on Islandfeld's side, and now that Memorial to Folly as well, though not a whole lot of reason to activate it currently.
Well, there's no creatures. You can't even activate it, I believe.
Exactly.
But I think Petter drew another land in this spot. And yeah, the Golden Demise is not really the answer that you want against the Immortal Sun.
Actually has another copy of Ixalan's Binding in hand for Islandfeld as well. We know that Lyra and that Immortal Sun doesn't die to Vraska's Contempt. We're going to draw a card here, sacrificing one of those treasures.
It might be that I was mistaken on the Immortal Sun in Samuel's hand, but I'm pretty sure I saw it. It's one of the rare artifacts in Samuel's deck, and it has a pretty iconic piece of art. But we'll see here what the choice of deployment is. I think with Samuel at 9 against the Chupacabra, though, it seems like a good spot as any to slam it down if it's there. Yeah.
The other consideration is I do think that there's a removal spell. Oh.
Dawn of Hope, okay.
Now that's interesting. Dawn of Hope is whenever you gain a life, you may pay 2 to draw a card, but also it's an army in a can. You can pay 4 mana to start producing life-linking 1/1 creatures. This is not something that I was really expecting, but coming out of the sideboard, there are 2 copies of it, and Islandfeld's going to try and get it done with this. I mean, that's going to be a difficult permanent to remove anyway.
Yeah, I mean, Vivian Reed would be kind of the only efficient answer at this point, being able to come down, but Petter drawing again a land is going to be hard. Petter just has very little action. There's a Vraska Contempt to deal with a creature. Golden Demise doesn't really deal with much. And yeah, at this point, Petter not even attacking because he doesn't want to give the free opportunity to Samuel to just attack and draw a card. And not really racing, right? You'd only deal 1 damage because of the lifelink, so there's no point in attacking here.
Yeah, and actually that card draw ability does cost 2 mana as it goes forward, so Islandfeld could have used the 2 treasures in order to do so, might also just continue using them to sacrifice and draw a card with the Treasure Cove.
Yeah, I think Samuel's focusing on drawing cards with those treasures. That's what they're for. There's no need for tempo here. And this is why Samuel is so far ahead, is Petter can't deal pressure, so at that point Samuel has infinite time to make the cards matter.
And that 4 mana left remaining, well, there's, I guess, 8 mana remaining, so actually could make 2 of those 1/1 soldiers at really any time. Might just choose to make the singular one and maintain that treasure, because if you end up blocking it all, you could use that remaining 3 mana to pay the cost to even draw that card. Islandfeld is in such a good position right now, as long as this Dawn of Hope is on the battlefield, because it is a win condition, it is how you're surviving, it's just getting everything done.
Yeah. And there's that Vivian Reed, so that's going to take out... It could take out the Ixalan's Binding, but I'm pretty sure taking down the Dawn of Hope is the line to go for here.
Yep, it's got that ability. It can either destroy a creature with flying, it can also take down artifacts and enchantments.
Also worth noting, Golden Demise here would hit the magical Ascend, so I think the plan here is destroy the Dawn of Hope, let Samuel create a token, and then Golden Demise them away. But even then, they're just 2 1/1 lifelinking creatures. Petter may just decide, yeah, you know what, this is fine. I don't need to Golden Demise right now. I'll keep it for later.
And that Golden Demise, because 10 permanents are on Sakurik's side of the field, it would only deal -2/-2 to each creature your opponents control, as opposed to its natural state, which is all creatures, which means that Ravenous Chupacabra could still get aggressive.
Yeah, but I think with Samuel creating another token, we might see it come down here so that Petter can deal damage. I think with only one token, Petter may not have played it, but with 2, for sure, it becomes much more attractive.
And there's going to be the attack in for 2. Islandfeld is down to 7. Looked to be in an absolutely commanding position just a couple of seconds ago. And that Vivian Reed has absolutely turned the tide. Islandfeld still in a fine position, but now looking down a Planeswalker and that Ravenous Chupacabra, things are certainly looking more bleak than they were.
Yeah, but I think there's another Ixalan's Binding in Samuel's hand, so we're probably going to see it here on the Vivian Reed, most likely, as a way to shut down any future ones. And then the Ravenous Chupacabra, I mean, it does deal 2 damage per turn, but it's not really going to get there. I mean, it might get there the whole way. Samuel really draws nothing. But there's going to be some gigantic angelic flyers coming in. Here's Excellence Binding.
Yep, that Excellence Binding, something that we saw earlier floating around in the hand. So now we can't even cast the backup copy of Vivian Reed, and it's going to be another 4. Oh, and that is going to be Lyra Dawnbringer. 5 mana there, and it is the 5/5 flyer. If there is no way to interact with that, though, I think I just saw a Vraska's Contempt.
Yeah, Petter has had this Vraska's Contempt for many turns, trying to find a good target. Finally gets one. Attacks in for 2. The cast down, again, it's a card that's very awkward because it doesn't deal with any of Samuel's big threats. A few of them are legendary, and Rekindling Phoenix has an egg, so you need more action than just the Vraska's Contempt. I still feel Samuel is ahead here since Samuel can just decide to Lava Coil away this. Yep, there we go.
All right, so Lava Coil is going to eliminate this Ravenous Chupacabra from the battlefield. Notably, it is going to... Oh, now, okay, so this is cast down on the Ravenous Chupacabra, and that means that rather than exile, it's going to go to the graveyard alongside that Memorial to Folly.
Very heads-up play here by Petter, deciding that the cast down... that the Ravenous Chupacabra can take care of anything down the line. So that's why you see it essentially Petter going, you know what, I'd rather transform this cast down into, and my Memorial to Folly, into a Ravenous Chupacabra.
All right, it looks like we've got a knight on the battlefield. Now, there are no black permanents on the battlefield currently, which means that it actually is going to be a 2/2.
Oh, and there's Assassin's Trophy.
Oh, and Assassin's Trophy takes down the Excellence Binding, bringing back Vivian Reed with that 5 loyalty. And remember that there's still that Memorial to Folly, which means that Ravenous Chupacabra could come back to the hand because it is in the graveyard. This is going to go ahead and take a look at the top cards of the library and find ourselves something to...
Yeah, Merfolk Branchwalker, totally fine. It's worth noting, obviously, that Chupacabra has low value here because of the Knight of Grace having hexproof from black. But what's important here, get that Merfolk Branchwalker in play and start generating an advantage with Vivian Reed. Yeah, that's an easy graveyard.
Not looking for a Llanowar Elves when you've already got 9 mana.
No,
surprisingly.
Turn 10 or whatever we're at. Llanowar Elves decides to show up. I like how he's like, could you maybe swap these dice since Vivian Reed's more likely to get larger than Merfolk Branchwalker?
Now, the Knight of Grace actually not easily answered because it can't be answered by that either.
But there's
cast
the
down.
Assassin's Trophy from the Direfleet Daredevil that Samuel had in hand. Vraska's Contempt, a cleaner answer, though.
Vraska's Contempt eliminates that, puts Islandfelt back up to 7, and now you've got this first striking 2/1, looking down to 3/2 of that Merfolk Branchwalker. This Knight of Grace will not be answered by the Chupacabra. It does have hexproof from black.
Yeah, but it's okay. Petter has quite a bit of time. This is not a ton of pressure. Although with the history of Benalia, that might change. However, Petter Sakuric quite capable of using the Memorial to Folly to get back the Chupacabra, and that can deal with a few of at least one of the knights, and then you can maybe double block the other Knight of Grace in order to just trade with it.
Looks like we're considering the Memorial to Folly before untapping with the turn, and we are going to activate that, put the Ravenous Chupacabra back in the hand of Sakuric, and then draw the card for turn. There's a lone Branchwalker facing down. Can't really get aggressive because of that Direfleet Daredevil. It's got first strike, and it is a 2/1. Lines up really nicely against the 3/2 body of the Branchwalker from that Explorer. Otherwise, Sakuric trying to figure out another game plan ahead because that History of Benalia is going to produce another Knight next turn, and the turn following that is going to produce a pretty substantial amount of pressure.
Yeah, but here, this is still a really even game. The creatures in play are important, but this could easily change with a Haymaker from either side. And with Petter at 22, there's not really that much pressure. At this point, Samuel has to chip away a lot at Petter's life total, so we're really close, especially with that Chupacabra kind of taking the board. Petter can easily just take a big hit from this History of Benalia down the line.
So that Ravenous Chupacabra and that Branchwalker facing down against 2 Knights, as well as a Knight of Grace, so I guess 3 Knights. And Islandfelt trying to find a pathway forward, needs to stay kind of this both offensive and defensive position because of his low life total, but he does need to find a way to close out the game. A land coming down for the turn. He's certainly got an abundance of resources, so if he did bring in that Banefire, might eventually be might eventually be relevant. It'd certainly be for 10 damage right now.
Yeah, but again, Petter being at 22. That's the Banefire makes sense in the control matchup since you're trying to deal pressure, but in this matchup you're just jockeying for position most of the time, so it becomes less powerful. And here, there's definitely an advantage. Like the Lava Coil on the Chupacabra makes sense. You don't want it to come back from a fine finality or potential Over Memorial to Folly, although again some of these cards might have been boarded out. But here an attack with both Knights. Samuel going to be left with the board. But if Petter just draws a big creature, say if a Carnage Tyrant was left in the deck, or, that might be enough to just take control. This is really down to trying to draw haymakers like Carnage Tyrant.
Carnage Tyrant hits the battlefield, and while this History of Benalia is about to hit its final chapter, there is a massive 7/6 Lizard Dinosaur on Sakirk's side of the field. This could be exactly what is needed to shut down this second game and bring us to a game 3. Islandfeld not looking at too many cards and really needs to come up with a way. Remember, those Knights that are currently there are actually 4/3s.
By the way, I love the flavor text on Carnage Tyrant. It kind of sums up my own executive view on the strategy behind it, and that's going to be lethal damage with the trample and the removal spell.
So Carnage Tyrant attacks and a Knight jumps in the way. You remove it, Assassin's Trophy. Trample does the rest, 7 damage, 7 life. That is going to be game 2, heading into the third game. Golgari mid-range, the aggro deck in this matchup, face-to-face with Boros mid-range. And is that something that you see shifting based on who's on the play or who's on the draw? Or is that something that really, it's been defined and that's going to be the situation for game 3 as well?
I think Samuel knew exactly what was going on because you don't usually play, he has relative knowledge of what the Golgari mid-range matchup is going to look like. Petter, it wasn't as clear, right? Petter had to work on incomplete information. He doesn't know necessarily what Samuel's full deck was about, but now Petter is going to probably sideboard a lot closer to a deck facing Boros Angels. So we might see 1 or 2 card shifts, something like the Deathgorge Scavenger. A little worse here. I mean, it was okay as a card, and he probably boarded out the mid-right Reapers for it. But main-right Reaper is actually an okay card in a matchup like this. Just trading for a Knight and drawing a card it's not great, but it's fine.
And especially in the post-board games where you're just under significantly less pressure, that life loss for card draw is a much more desirable trade-off.
Right, and that's the thing is Petter is deciding am I going to be put on am I the aggressor or defense? And Petter is just not sure. That role might change just depending on the draw. But yeah, I wanted to the Carnage Tyrant flavor text kind of summarizes the strategy.
Oh yeah, let's get back to it.
Yeah, so got it here. Sun Empire commanders are well versed in advanced martial strategy. Still, the correct maneuver is usually to deploy the giant implacable Death Lizard. As we saw there, I mean, flavor text doesn't usually contain strategic advice, but, it's a mythic rare. You got to prepare it for competitive play. That's why you have to inform people about the best use of the card, which is just deploy it.
Sometimes you're looking at a hand with a Branch Walker and a Chupacabra, and then, of course, Carnage Tyrant. That's probably the right choice.
Right, if you have the mana to play it, of course. Just deploy the giant implacable Death Lizard.
There's just not much better than it. It's a reason to be in green. And actually, we've seen so many people racing to do that Carnage Tyrant. That has been such a commanding card for this green-black deck. Some versions even explicitly racing to put that one down as soon as possible and ride that to victory.
Right. This isn't Petter's version, but there are a few with even Druid of the Cowl. I remember one of the... I can't remember the exact placing or player, but one of the players was in the... I think it was like top 32-ish, or the Pro Tour, like the top end. And that player played green-black almost ramp. 4 Llanowells, 4 Druid of the Cowl, 4 Carnage Tyrant. Very simple 1-2, let's go.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly remember reading about that deck and sort of the mentality that they had going into it, just trying to push forward as much damage as possible and trying to get it done. I believe that was Michael Kunugraber?
Yeah. Played, in his words, BG Dumb Dinos at Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. My very first PT to a 15-place finish. If you're interested in that, the comment is in the Spikes thread on Reddit. Yeah, so it's r/Spikes. If you're interested in his tournament report, it's there. I know a lot of competitive players go there and try to share a strategy. I know Lucas Esperberto always shares his tournament reports after any big event on there, and big fan of that community there. So shout out to that community if there's anybody listening from there. I know there a lot of aspiring players go there, and it's a really positive atmosphere because they just focus on trying to improve decks, improve strategy, and there's a sentiment there of just focusing on that side of things.
Yeah, and that tournament report was phenomenal to read, the way that discussing the matchups and also even the card inclusions that went into it.
Yeah, and it's good, right? Like, I mean, going 15 for your first PT is amazing. Like that's I cannot understate that achievement. Obviously, Samuel went fourth.
I mean,
or third.
That's
top
rookie
four.
of the year, Sam.
Yeah, we can't all be that. My rookie year was certainly not as good. I think I went to one PT, and that was kind of it. It was nice, though. We had raclette and croissant. It was in Geneva, Switzerland. Every day we crossed the border because the hotel we stayed at was on the French side. But anyways, the game's starting.
Sometimes the biggest wins are the memories.
The biggest wins are always the memories.
Knight of Grace comes down turn 2 for Islandfeld. For Sakuric, it's going to be, and this is the card I've been looking to see. It's Wild Growth Walker, and if there's no removal here, we saw how quickly Sakuric was ready to move that one to the graveyard, though it actually goes to exile because that Lava Coil in a deck with Fine Finality and Memorial to Folly, that is going to be relevant.
We noted, if you might have noted that Samuel had access to History of Benalia and just privileged killing the Wild Growth Walker here. And I like this take from Petter more for game 3. Rather than putting in removal spells, put in a proactive card like Wild Growth Walker that can be good against these aggressive decks.
There's the attack.
This is a free attack. You're almost not blocking with Knight of Grace here, ever. Like either the Walker is a 1-free and it doesn't attack, or it's a 2-4 and you're not blocking. So Petter is thinking about it and decides to take the damage.
I'm not sure if there's anything yet. I guess there is the shock that is a single one, and Petter did see that in game 1, so might be just paying a little bit of respect to the shock.
Yeah, deciding here I don't want to lose my Walker to potentially a shock, so this free attack paying off for Samuel, and a good head, it may go through just a very small percentage of the time, but when it does, that 2 damage can really matter, especially with something like History of Benalia.
Ooh, Rekindling Phoenix comes down to the battlefield, the flying 4/3 that has a pretty hard time quitting and leaving the battlefield. Sakuric with this Wild Growth Walker looking to do a little bit of exploring, but I actually don't see a single Explore card in hand. I do see access to a Ravenous Chupacabra, but it's actually not a very good card to play. Oh, never mind. There was a Jade Light Ranger. That's going to get us 2 Explorers, gain 6 life, and turn that Wild Growth Walker into a 3/5.
More importantly here, though, for Petter doesn't have access to a second block source, and that is going to be a problem. Yeah, obviously the Jade Light Ranger is 4-free here. But yeah, and the Death Core Scavenger came in mostly probably to deal with that Rekindling Phoenix. We can combine a cast down with it to get rid of the Phoenix. And I think that combined with the Dire Fleet Daredevil is enough reason to include it. But it's very close with something like Midnight Reaper. But I think with Lava Coil being present, it makes sense then to have the Scavenger. It was just very strange because we kind of saw both. But so it was an unusual draw. But here, it's going to be, Petter has access to many Planeswalkers, but this Rekindling Phoenix is going to make the life of those Planeswalkers very difficult. It's going to be hard for Petter to take over while this Phoenix is in play, and especially if Samuel taps out for a big Angelic Flyer.
Lyra Dawnbringer and Rekindling Phoenix joining that Knight of Grace, which came down on turn 2. This curve has looked phenomenal for Islandfeld, and Sakuric really needs to come up with some answers. None of the creatures that he currently has are up in the air. He is at 22. He's got a pretty nice buffer of life. But those flyers are going to swing in very hard, and if he doesn't find his 5th mana right now, there is a Vivian Reed in hand, but he needs to be able to cast it.
Also, Ravenous Chupacabra. This is just a very unfortunate sequence of draws. Petter has the Chupacabra, has, it seems, the Vivian Reed, even has Vraska Relic Seeker, but not able to find another black source, and decides to sacrifice a forest and go, you know what, if I don't find that source of mana, I'm going to be in real trouble. So I'm going to sacrifice this forest, try to draw a land, and doesn't.
Oh no, Vraska Golgari Queen, high risk, and unfortunately it does not pay off. So not only did we not find our black mana source, we're now down to 3 mana.
I wonder here if sacrificing the Jade Light Ranger might have been the way to go. Obviously sacrificing a 4-free is not great, but between the Vraska essentially requiring both creatures to go in for damage, plus the land being on. I think here, getting rid of the J-Light Ranger and trying to get a Planeswalker down might have been the priority. But yeah, Ixalan's Binding, getting rid of Vraska. This means Samuel can attack in for 9 in the air, and Petter's going to go to 10, and that's, a free turn clock.
All right, the Rekindling Phoenix and Lyra Dawnbringer, and it's not going to be the most relevant, but it's definitely worth noting is that that's also lifelink on Lyra Dawnbringer, which Islandfeld is going to get a huge buffer of life that even if this ends up stabilizing, overall, it's going to take a lot of work from Sakuric to make up that deficit.
Yeah, and having Forest rather than Overgrown Tomb is hurting Petter so much. A Chupacabra able to deal with a Lyra Dawnbringer, it'd still be a relatively even game that Ixalan's Binding would have had a good target. It looks like Petter did draw at least the Woodland Cemetery, so that's going to be very important to deal with this Lyra. But decides not to play it first, just puts in the damage, and we're probably going to see this Ravenous Chupacabra come down, take down the Lyra.
That's going to be the case, so now it is just the Rekindling Phoenix. Sakuric still at 10. It's going to be a swing in for 4, and if Sakuric is able to find that last mana source next turn, is going to be able to deploy Vivian Reed and start working their way back into this one, but it's still going to take more than that against the Rekindling Phoenix because of its ability to come back to the battlefield. So really needs to put together something impressive to take down that Flying Phoenix.
Yeah, and this is all very wide board by Samuel now. Now, Petter has to deal with that Rekindling Phoenix and is going to have to be ready for a big History of Benalia turn. I think it's possible. If Petter gets a Vraska's Contempt to deal with the Phoenix, then the game becomes kind of even since there'll be one big attack from all these Knights, but then Petter is able to come back. And this is a ton of life from the J-Light Ranger. That's why these Knights aren't too much of a problem, while the Phoenix will be because it's just a constant source of damage. And, yep, Petter getting out of all these mana issues.
Yeah, and that Jade-Light Ranger, well, you are at 6, but now you're back up to 12, so you're actually negating the last swing from that Phoenix and gaining a little bit of life in addition to it, growing the board, and now Sakuric can start focusing on a couple of other options, especially now that he'll have a little bit of extra mana to maybe double spell in order to eliminate that Rekindling Phoenix.
Yeah, and I mean, the problem is Petter's under quite a bit of pressure still, and you can see the difference between going for the Wildgrowth Walker plan or the removal plan. Is Wildgrowth Walker is just good offensively and defensively. It is a 5/7 creature. It's large.
Oh,
it's getting larger.
Sorry, that's actually a 6/8.
My apologies. And there's the finality.
Oh,
a really key draw for Petter. This will allow Petter to essentially wipe all these Knights before History of Benalia. And now, the game has swung back. With all this life gain and the finality, Petter is finally taking control of this game. Petter was behind most of this game, not being able to deploy the threats, with mana issues, letting Samuel take over. But with that finality and these gigantic creatures in play, this is going to be a really hard one for Samuel. Now, that said, now that the finality is known, the Wildgrowth Walker, can attack in. It doesn't die, but there was an option here for Samuel to just chump block, but then Petter can use, there might be a situation then where Petter uses the finality to just get back something like a Chupacabra that chump blocks plus a Seeker Squire, so that's why you don't see a chump block here. Samuel wants to at least commit Petter to casting it and killing some of his own creatures.
All right, so we are going to Rekindling Phoenix. Up top, we have got a whole host of Knights down at the bottom, a round table of them that are going to be getting a pretty significant boost next turn, trying to reach across this battlefield and close it out. After this game, a lot of back and forth, and it is now back to 15 all, both for Petter and Samuel. And we've even seen that advantage bar early on look so incredibly in Islandfeld's favor, missing those land drops, and now it is working its way back over to Sakuric. Oh, are we going to see the Direfleet Daredevil?
Yeah, I mean, at that point then, both players would be kind of even. Petter would have a 6/5 J-Light Ranger, and Samuel would have a Rekindling Phoenix in play, so it'd be kind of even, but Petter has more cards, so Petter remains ahead in this position. Actually, yeah, so we see here the Direfleet Daredevil, but giving the land to Petter, actually, while it does deal with the Wildgrowth Walker, it is helping Petter cast all these Planeswalkers in hand. I think Petter is taking the advantage here. If there's an answer to this Rekindling Phoenix on top, this is going to be a really big game.
And actually, I think I saw Vraska Relic Seeker in hand for Sakuric as well, so getting that last mana source is going to be a really nice way to cast both that and the finality.
Yeah. Well, obviously Petter revealed a Neverland, so Samuel knows that there's a fine finality, and there's the mana to cast it because of Jade Light Ranger, and then Seeker Squire revealed the fine finality.
That's right.
But yeah, here's Samuel just attacking. Petter here most likely just going to block with creatures that die. And they're going to die anyways to find finality. So we're likely going to see the Jade Light Ranger, the Ravenous Chupacabra get in the way.
Now, these Knights of Grace are actually 3/2s currently because they get +1/+0 if there is a black permanent on the battlefield, and the Ravenous Chupacabra and the Seeker Squire both satisfy that demand.
Yeah. Now this block, this is an interesting block because Petter would be left with no creatures with the fine finality with it, but the Knights of Grace are gone, which means that Petter isn't committing to this fine finality. So I wonder if Petter has different plans with it. Yeah, so here we're going to see the Assassin's Trophy get cast on the Swallowgrowth Walker, which makes sense.
And we're now down to just 2 creatures left. It is a Jade Light Ranger as a 2/1 and that Ravenous Chupacabra. We're casting that, and I think there's the consideration of playing around that at all, or is Sakura going to be looking for a land?
I think they're checking if Petter gets to look for land, but I believe so. Wait, okay. Let me check the text on that card. Did we miss something here? And last game something happened that shouldn't have?
Or declining to. We do know.
Oh yeah. You can. They're checking if they can decline, right? Like Assassin's Trophy would shuffle. Sorry. Yes, you can look for a land. That makes sense. But it's you may search. So Petter declining here to get the fine finality and because he has a land in hand, so it makes sense here.
Right.
My apologies here. But yeah. By the way, something we haven't noticed so far, and that's going to be critical here. That clock is low. There is a 4-minute time extension, so it's not critically low, but it's getting to the point where it might be. And here, Vraska Relic Seeker.
All right. So
is it okay? So we got word that the time extension should already be in there.
So that 2 minutes and 20 seconds that we see is including the time extension at the table. So time is running a little bit shy. It's 15 to 11, and there is that consideration on both sides of trying to find a way to close this game out.
By the way, Petter here not playing the fine finality. Petter's plan, get that Vraska Relic Seeker to kill the Rekindling Phoenix, and then cast it.
Oh, and it's going to survive because with the Rekindling Phoenix attacking in, it's only going to deal 4. That leaves 4 loyalty. And those remaining attackers can all be stopped by the Menacing Pirate, the Ravenous Chupacabra, and that Jade Light Ranger.
Right, they can all lightly block it. There's nothing Samuel can do to prevent the fine finality. So here Samuel's going to attack everything at Vraska most likely, and Petter is going to probably, as you mentioned, just triple chump block. Vraska would be at 4, minus free, Rekindling Phoenix back to 1. And then after that, fine finality, clear the board. We're going to have an NT board, but one player has Vraska Relic Seeker and the other one doesn't.
And we're going to have to see if that's enough to close this game out in the time remaining. That's a -3 ability. I think we're seeing the blocks there on it.
But another Rekindling Phoenix, really. So yeah, we're going to be left with a Rekindling Phoenix on an empty board. That was a really key draw, actually, for Samuel here.
Yeah, and actually, just notably, none of those attacks were going towards Vraska. Actually,
with the second Phoenix, it makes sense. The clock's low. You need to put pressure. You can't play the longest game now just because of how this game is developing. So Samuel decided to attack the Phoenix on Petter, which makes sense. Essentially, Samuel trying to get there. But Petter still has that Vivian Reed in hand.
And we've got one of these eggs from the Phoenixes. There were 2 of them. They both died. They both produced one. And then that Vraska Relic Seeker used the -3 to eliminate one of them. But that does mean that there's still this 4/3 flyer on the battlefield. Sakurik tapped out except for that treasure and a Llanowar elf, though that one's got summoning sickness. Now it is a Vraska and an elf up against a Phoenix, 15 to 7, and Eilenfeld is going to be getting in an attack, and this is probably going to be the maybe the last turn that we have before we are on the final 5 turns. These players really trying to find a way to close this game out in their favor, and I think right now that is leaning towards, I imagine Eilenfeld just through the benefit of having the attacker that's in the air.
Yeah, I'm going to put the advantage bar back in the middle because now Samuel's really the only player that can win, but it's unlikely that Samuel would win an infinitely long game. And there's turn 1. Petter, it's going to be, unless there's exactly a Carnage Tyrant this turn, I just don't see how Petter can take it down, but Petter has to deal with the Rekindling Phoenix this turn. So That combination means I don't think there's going to be enough attacks for Petter to take it down. Here we're... well, wait. Okay. We can Vivian read the Ixalan's Binding to get back the Vraska, which is a better line, yes. So instead of killing the Phoenix and then Vraskaing it, yeah, you can do this. You can Vivian read the Ixalan's Binding, and then you can minus the Vraska Golgari Queen. Yeah.
Okay, I was a little bit perplexed there. Nice thinking, Eduardo, and nice thinking, Petter Sakuric. So, is there any way to get enough attacks in? This is turn 1. There is the swing for 1, so there's going to be 2 more attacks on the side of Sakuric.
So we can do the math easily here, right? So Petter technically is advantaged, but again, this is the second extra turn. So here, Petter would attack for 5. Deathgorge Scavenger definitely has more than enough food, and there's a Llanowar Elf. So that's 5. That puts Samuel down to 9. Then Vraska can make a token. That's up to 7. And Vivian Reed can get a creature. So Petter potentially on track to take it down, but Samuel can easily play a blocker. However, then the Vraska Relic Seeker, the Vraska Golgari Queen, and the Vivian Reed are all differently capable on the 5th turn to use themselves to kill a creature in front. So I think Sakuric might be able to take this down on exactly turn 5 unless Samuel finds something amazing.
We're going to put that card on the bottom, so that treasure map not leading us to it just yet. We're going to rip one off the top and hope for the best, and I think that was a land. It's going to go right back to Petter Sakuric, who has now got that Llanowar Elf, that Deathgorge Scavenger, and looking to draw something to just provide, I think really only 2 more power is needed, either from the draw or from the Vivian Reed.
Yeah, because you're adding 2 power from Vraska's Relic Seeker. Samuel will go down to 9 this turn. Maybe 10 if, yeah. Here, yeah, draw with Vraska's Golgari Queen first, then Vivian Reed. So we got Merfolk Branchwalker. That's good enough. Merfolk Branchwalker's fine. It does what it needs to do, which is just provide 2 power.
And now we've still got that Relic Seeker. We're going to throw down that Branchwalker. We look at the top card. That is a Jadelight Ranger. Which
doesn't really do anything here because you don't have the time, so...
Puts a +1/+1 counter, though.
By the way, there's green mana floating from the Vraska Golgari Queen. You know, there was a forest sacrificed, and then the green mana was floating, so that's why you see Branchwalker cast. So here, Deathgorge Scavenger, removing a non-creature spell, dealing 5 damage. There's no real way to get out of Banefire range here, since the treasure map would transform, and that puts Samuel up to a Banefire for 8. So Petter could only have gone... Actually, with the Scavenger, Petter could have gone up to 10 and prevented a Banefire from taking it down. So now if Samuel boarded in Banefire, that's the out. Like, Petter could have prevented this, I think. Samuel would have been at 10, and Petter also. But then Samuel couldn't have Banefired. If Samuel had Banefired a creature, that would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. Yeah, so Petter could have gone to 10 here.
It's the Scribe. That's to the bottom, and
Petter could have prevented a Banefire from taking it down. So if Samuel has a Banefire in the deck and top decks it, Samuel would be able to take it down. I don't think there's a card otherwise, unless Samuel decides to keep in Deathling Clarion. But yeah, treasure map, and Petter is going to take it down on turn 5. Wow, whoa. What a takedown.
Sakuric takes down the win, and looking at that state when turns started, that is remarkable how quickly he was able to generate such an impressive board and close out that game. That was 15 damage in the course of 3 turns from a deck that, you know, it had a Llanowar Elf available.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, Petter had just so much action in hand, couldn't deploy it, had to essentially deal with all the threats that Samuel was presenting, and then eventually hit the mana, really positioned himself well to make sure that the Rekindling Phoenix was gone. Saw a second one, so that was unfortunate. But Samuel going, you know what, there's not much time. I need to attack Petter. At that point, the Vraska stayed. Petter wasn't able to deal with the Vraska Relic Seeker, and Petter was able to unleash all the Planeswalkers at once to deal with Samuel's board and then deal with Samuel on exactly the last turn.
And that was such a key part, too. Going for that slightly alternative line, the intuitive one, is just to use the minus, remove it, play down another, and kill the egg. But using that ability to destroy the enchantment and getting all 3 Planeswalkers, I think was a very relevant part in making sure that that win was able to come about. So that was a really fantastic line.
I think the more interesting line and the one that actually showcased Petter's ability the best, because I think that line, like once you see it, you understand it's just better, right? Like you just get a Planeswalker on top. But the biggest line for me was not casting the Find Finality right away, getting the Vraska Relic Seeker first down, getting it up to 8, making sure it doesn't die, and then casting the Find Finality when Petter was good and ready to make sure the board was clean. I thought that was the best line that Petter took in that game, and that was really heads-up play on how to essentially win these mid-range mirrors, right? You're trying to be the one with the board standing at the end when the dust is settled, and that's exactly what Petter did.
Well, a fantastic demonstration of the power of this green-black deck. Now that is going to lock it up here for round 9. I'm TJ, this is Eduardo, and we'll be right back with Maria and Reed.